Hello, and welcome to an all new episode of Talking Game of Thrones. I am your host, Kente, all the way live from Los Angeles, California, and I'm so happy to be here with you. We will be covering the final episode of the series, the HBO hit series, Game of Thrones. And I'm here with my wonderful co host, the one and only Jen. How you doing, Jen?
I'm emotional, but I'm holding in.
All right. Okay. So we are going to break down this finale, and then at some point we're going to go back and kind of talk about the show overall. But we really want to focus on this finale. So if anybody wants to add to this conversation, if you want to hop in, let us know, and we'll open up a seat and have you join in and take part in this discussion. So let me. All right. Okay, so let's do this. All right, so this was the final episode. A lot went down. I think ultimately who sat on, well, I can't even say who sat on the Iron Throne because the Iron Throne was destroyed, but who ultimately became the king of now the Six Kingdoms. I think that's kind of a surprise. I haven't heard too many people. I haven't heard too many people saying that they thought Bran was going to end up being the final, person in on the throne. I keep saying on the throne, but there is no throne anymore. So, were you surprised with that?
I was pretty surprised, yeah. Although, I feel like you and I have had discussions about just about everybody at one point or another being sort of a contender. And as I was talking to the person that watched it with me, my son, we definitely went back and forth about who we had thought over the years would end up being the ruler, if you will. And to me, the interesting thing about the way that was chosen, or not the way that it was chosen, but who it finally ended up there was, I have so many questions. It is difficult for me to summarize. If we just look at who Bran is, then great, and I'll just approach this sort of like incrementally in small pieces. But the bigger part of Game of Thrones as a series 8 in totality just didn't work for me at all. I'm emotional because it's over and done, and I'm sad that it's ended, but I don't feel like that was a really good resolution at all. I mean, I don't know. Did you feel that way?
That Bran the Broken got it.
Well, okay, so not just Bran, but yes, Bran, and also sort of everything that led up to it.
I wasn't happy. Okay, we all figured that he was going to kill Danny, but I don't know, man. The way that it played out, it was just kind of like, okay, it happened. I mean, it was kind of beautiful with how the dragon reacted. I kind of like that part of it, but I don't know. It was just kind of.
That's a problem. That's a problem. If the and I'm sorry, because that was also extremely emotional for me too. But if Drogon's reaction to Danny's death is the strongest reaction inside of that scene, then tell me how that's not done wrong. Or no, I should say done wrong. Then tell me how that's done to satisfy the audience. Like, it is hard. I didn't even feel anything when Jon stabbed her. I mean, it was a tiny bit emotional that he had to stab, whatever. But I didn't feel anything until Drogon came up and, did his "Hey, are you alive?" thing. Then it was emotional. And if that's what evokes emotion in the scene, how is that? I don't know. I just have so many. There's so many moments, and this is just the typification, right? This is definitely on par for season 8. This feels very season 8-ish, but it is exactly the same problem that they had all throughout season 8, which is things happen for no apparent reason, and we're just supposed to accept them because we do. And I just can't. It's hard for me to understand where they were going.
Yeah, yeah, it was kind of weak. I was disappointed too. But I think what made it worse was the episode leading up to it.
Right.
Made it even more worse because it actually happened the way I thought it would. That something big would happen very early, and then the rest of the show would be kind of this is what giving you an insight of what's coming. Like
right. They had to tie up all the loose ends, and I'm glad that they did. And I'm also, I from a technical standpoint, season 8 and this episode is no different. Has been masterful. Once again, the sound editing in this episode was phenomenal. The editing itself was amazing. There were so many good pieces to what was happening here, but the story was so I don't know. It just didn't feel complete. Although at the end, I am really glad that they showed all the Stark kids who survived all the way, up until well, for the most part, all the surviving Stark kids, that they all went on their own ways, that they all were sort of, scattered to the different places. But basically, the world is now controlled by Starks, which is an amazing premise to put forward if you go back to the beginning of the story and wonder what might happen. I mean, if you watch this series, I think, again, in retrospect, I don't feel like you would ever get the clue that Starks would rule the world. But I liked that part. What I didn't like was just, it just felt like it was narratively not put together in a way that made me go, oh yeah, this is what's supposed, or not even this is what's supposed to happen, but wow, there's so much to unpack here. This could be really amazing. And instead it just kind of feels weak. And I don't know. Sometimes I feel afraid about sort of putting that out there because I know there's a lot of people who feel very strongly that this is, it's their favorite show. It's been great. But I can't seem to excuse the sloppy storytelling of definitely season 8 and season 7, but maybe even as far back as season 6. So yeah, there you go.
In the chat room, Mikael says the thing is the entire season because they got the Star Wars contract, and he agrees with you. And he said season 8 was horrible, maybe good after 2 or 3, episode 2 or 3. I see Keenan in the house as well, and Eric. It's interesting. I had an interesting conversation with someone, and I'm not going to bust him out. But she was essentially saying she likes this last season, right? Mm-hmm. And she was entertained. She does say that, she leaves room for that. There were, things that could have been better. But her take is that overall she enjoyed it, right? And then she says that she's bothered by people criticizing it. And she says that people who, I'm trying to remember exactly what she said. She said that people who what was it that she said? People who criticize people's passion or something like that, it's unfair to them and yada, yada, yada. And I said, you know what? That goes in part of doing creative stuff. It's like,
right.
You're going to be criticized for the work that you do. That's just what it is. So if you're not able to deal with that, how you doing, Tachi? If you're not able to deal with being criticized for the work that you've done, you may want a different job.
But also, let's back up here for a second, because so this episode in particular, I think, is one of the best examples of why it had so much potential. Every scene in this episode had incredible amounts of potential, and it just sort of died off. And that is not to say that, and I've said this maybe 100 times since just I've been involved in just the Game of Thrones podcast. It's not that the show overall is bad. That is so not what I'm saying. What I am saying, and what I'm voicing as frustration, is that episodically Game of Thrones continued to move in the only way I can describe it is a downward cycle from probably maybe like mid-season 6 or so on. And there have been bright spots, and there have been episodes that were better than others. But if you look at the overall storytelling, it stopped being vital and important, and it became something that they were hurtling toward the end of, instead of extrapolating the important pieces that would give us depth into the story, that would make it's not, they have had so many chances to do little things that would have helped a lot, and they've chosen to concentrate instead on big things that didn't mean as much. And I realize that sounds like a profound word salad, but it's really the way that it was. If every detail that they had paid attention to had mattered, instead of doing these big grand spectacles that didn't matter, then I think we all would have been more satisfied. And this end episode makes me think just as much. The one small, tiny, itty-bitty scene with Jon Snow reuniting with Ghost was better than almost every other scene Jon Snow was in, except for in the Iron Throne room. That is really, and that, to me, that makes me so sad, because Jon Snow's arc was so huge that to have it end and I'm take out the last piece just for a second, where he's going off past the wall. Forget that for just a second. Everything that he did in the Capitol, everything that happened to him in the Capitol, everything, he didn't even get a speaking chance before everybody, before the leaders of Westeros. Everything that they have led us to believe was important about the story and Jon Snow simply became not important. And I don't know how to reconcile that. So I understand what she's saying, and I hear that I know why it can bother people. And that is why I'm sometimes maybe more cautious than not about what I say. But I think people have to understand that this story is such a magnificent story, and everybody wanted it to succeed. But I don't think that just because you want it to succeed means that you can excuse sloppy storytelling. I think that that's just not okay. And if we don't hold people to better standards in storytelling, then we're just going to get a lot of junk.
No, I agree. I'm not, look, they don't pay me to be nice, just for the sake of it, you know what I mean? So I'm going to talk freely. I'm going to speak freely about what I feel. It's very disappointing. This season was very disappointing on so many levels. And it did feel rushed. It felt rushed. It felt like, they got a lot of toys to play with, and they, and then of course, as we talked before, they lost the blueprint, and they didn't know how to get it to the end properly. So let's start back at the beginning of this episode tonight. And there's something I wanted to talk about, and that's that is Tyrion. Now, the scene where he finds his brother and sister, I thought that was cool, as far as having that moment where he had that closure of knowing what their ultimate outcome is, right? I think that if that had collapsed in like that, they wouldn't have been able to, like, it didn't seem like he would have been able to do that. But it's it is what it is. But I thought that scene was very powerful. So in that regard, I liked it, and that kind of informed all of his decisions afterwards. and the scene where he throws off his his pin. I thought that was really good and it was powerful, and it kind of reminded me of that scene. Reminded me a little bit of The Force Awakens with Hux when he's giving the speech to the First Order.
Yeah, that's a good. Yeah, you're right.
Right.
It's also very reminiscent of what Ned Stark did when Ned Stark completely disagreed and said absolutely not to Robert Baratheon.
No. I mean, I'm talking about. I kind of switched. I'm sorry. Danny's speech.
Oh, Danny's
The
speech.
way that it looked, the way that it visually
Yeah.
looked,
Oh,
kind
yeah.
of.
I see what you're saying. And yes,
Yeah,
you're right.
that.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So yeah, I thought that was cool, and they're about to go do Star Wars. How you doing, Brad?
And it's clear from that, it was very clear from Danny's speech that, of course, that this was not the resolution, that peace did not mean that they had taken King's Landing and now Danny was on the Iron Throne, that it meant something far different to Daenerys than even we understood from maybe we should have understood all the way through, but just weren't given character cues to. But one thing that I will say, which I am, I'm happy about, is that in that moment they didn't make Daenerys sound like the Mad Targaryen, and I am especially thankful about that because although her decision to burn King's Landing, in retrospect, seems callous and cruel, and I don't even know how you begin to excuse it. I do think that what Jon Snow said to Daenerys really did resonate in some ways. In the it I can see this is exactly how people, even in our everyday lives, get trapped in thinking that do a little bad for the greater good. And I think that was a profound statement. That was actually one of the highlights for me. But the other thing that was also, I think, interesting was it Daenerys in that moment was as much of a queen, I think, as Cersei ever was, and possibly more so. But she was still the embodiment of basically what Cersei on a different side was saying as well, which is, how can I even say this? Absolute power corrupts, absolutely. But it's not always because you are bad intentioned. It's not always because you are a Cersei Lannister looking for, whatever Cersei was looking for. I don't even want to go there. But Daenerys's intentions were perhaps better than normal. So I guess what I'm saying is I'm really glad that they didn't turn her into the Mad King, because I thought that that's where they were going to go after she went on her dragon flight of fire.
She did Mad Queen already, so she burnt up everything. But didn't the throne room look dope with the missing wall? Like,
yeah, it did.
I love that look. That set looked really cool.
It did.
But you know what? You can argue that she won in a way because she always wanted to get what she felt like it was hers, and she did achieve it.
Yep.
Although it was very short lived, you can make an argument that, okay, she didn't sit in the Iron Throne physically, but it was hers.
Right.
And then once she died, her dragon destroys it, which was a great scene. It was very, that visual of the destruction of it was pretty cool. So, did you think for a moment that Jon Snow was going to get burnt? I didn't.
No, and as a matter of fact, we were talking during the episode about Jon Snow being a Targaryen and why it was so important that he was a Targaryen in that very moment in the throne room with all of the fire going around, because we know that's actually a thing. But also the fact. Okay, so just from well, I guess from a symbolic standpoint, the fact that Drogon destroyed the Iron Throne and melted it made me, it actually brought back weird memories of what's his name, Daenerys's brother getting his crown of molten lava metal on his head, his crown of gold. But aside from that piece, the idea that no Targaryen, therefore nobody, if a Targaryen can't sit on the Iron Throne and Jon Snow was rightful heir, blah blah blah, nobody can sit on the Iron Throne. That actually made a lot of sense to me. I mean, I feel like in that moment I sort of knew where they were going narratively, and it was pretty good. That was really good.
Yeah, no, I thought it was. I thought I do agree. I thought that was pretty cool.
Once again, I'm struck by the fact that this show has gone out of its way, and so are the books. Really, I mean, George Martin goes out of his way to help us remember that the threat to humanity is always from within the ranks of humanity and not an outside force. It's not the dead. It's not it's not some fleeting army. What matters is the small choices that we make. They are the things that make us good people. It's not the giant choices that we make necessarily. It's the small choices that we make. And I mean, I feel like they did. I wish that they would have sort of extrapolated that out just a little bit more, but I'm happy that that was at least included. And I see that in this episode as well. I see all the little choices mattering. And that, I think, is really important because that's exactly what A Song of Ice and Fire is really all about.
Did you like the book, A Song of Ice and Fire?
I thought it was kind of tongue in cheek, but it was. But I did like it. I did feel like it was definitely an interesting shout out, if you will. I think that they did a good job with that. Yeah. I also have to say that I really like the fact that Sam is on the council because that makes me truly happy.
Yeah. What do you think about how the Unsullied reacted to Dany's death?
This is okay. So not that any of them were involved with any historical big productions, but clearly everyone who has been a writer on the show or the lead writers on the show understand history because that's exactly the same kind of thing that has happened in history, especially in Rome, where you have the armies that basically take over power, and then it takes something to break that power. And usually it happens peacefully enough, but there has to be some... I actually think that was good. I think that was smart of them to do. Because if they had just had anybody come in and say, okay, well, now I'm going to... Then I feel like it would have just been so jumbled and so messy. And also, just so that you know, as we were sitting here, my son was saying to me when Sam stood up and said, well, how about if we give everybody a vote? And I said that this must just be a shout out to democracy because clearly they can't choose that. And Tristan, my son, he laughed so hard because that exactly is 100% what happened. It was just a little shout out to democracy. So that also made me happy. What's next? A vote for the dogs?
Yeah, that was funny. And it was cool seeing Tobias Mendes back on the show. I think the last time we seen him was the Red Wedding.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was cool. And I like how he got up to give his speech. And then he, it didn't go well for him.
No, I don't think anybody in their right mind could have thought that was going to go well for him.
But I thought that was pretty funny. Yeah, that was a funny scene.
Either I'm cutting in and out or you're cutting in and out.
Oh no, I mean no, we're good. I think we're good.
Yeah.
So everybody can hear us. All right. So Bronn, not to be confused with Brian the Broken. And side note, don't add Broken to my nickname, like don't to my name and think it does. No, that's not cool. I don't want to be Kente the Broken. I don't think you want to be Jen the Broken. That does not make it cool. So no.
No, no, there was definitely less than. They should have given him a more heroic title, but whatever.
And the Broken, or shouldn't it be Three Eyed Raisin? Raisin, Three Eyed Raven the Broken.
I don't. I see. I think. Okay, that this is where I start to have philosophical differences in the way that they presented the story, because from what I understand, the Three-Eyed Raven, this to be involved in something as mundane as and as ridiculous as that sounds, as ruling the six kingdoms, or even acquiescing that there are just six kingdoms and one kingdom can be independent, any of that feels so un Three-Eyed Raven. And I think I sort of know where they were trying to go, because Tyrion's speech said, there is nothing more powerful or more basically unbroken than a story. And so who better than the keeper of all stories to lead? But and maybe if they had sort of explained that more, maybe I would have been more convinced. But it feels so not the Three-Eyed Raven to be there. And for Bran to say, well, why do you think I'm here? Doesn't feel right. It feels wrong. It feels untrue to the rest of everything that they expected us to believe about Bran and who the Three-Eyed Raven is. And so I don't know. I don't know how to feel about that.
Mm. Yeah, I don't know either. I do feel like I do feel like that's an interesting turn that his character went. Um, and I don't know, man. I, I don't know. I have to think about that. I guess I need more to think about how I feel about that. But Braun, I was so glad to see him back, and
Yeah.
I love, he's one of my favorite characters on the show. I kind of wish he had more to do with this season, but
Yeah.
I mean, he can't bring everybody because he's one of my favorites. But yeah, I really think that uh, I really enjoyed how he came back and all of that stuff. Um,
Also, just before I forget, for anybody who gets a chance to see this again, watch the opening credits again, because the opening credits were actually really interesting this time. They what they did animation style, or not animation style, but what they did with the animation was actually kind of interesting. So you should definitely go back and take a look at it.
are you sad that Danny didn't become queen?
Personally, no, I don't. I, it's bittersweet. There is a level of sadness about watching someone rise in power so much. But honestly, last episode sort of broke that feeling that, well, maybe she'll do what's right and just for the Seven Kingdoms. And, then we can sort of have some resolution with the hope that something happens after, something like that. That would, to me, that would have been, I just feel like it would have been more satisfactory. But last episode, when she fired the town, it's really hard to come back from that. It's you know what I mean?
Right.
I mean, I feel like my mourning was actually last episode, when when her choice was to burn thousands and thousands of people in King's Landing.
You're not okay with mass murder?
On a general level, no, no, no.
Oh,
It actually, what actually bothers me more than anything? What bothers me more than anything is how quickly the Dothraki and the Unsullied simply took orders and didn't question at all, because that's such a dangerous thing, that if they had had more time to explore it, wow, I mean, that's such a huge, if you have an army of that size and they are loyal to you to a fault, but then never question even even execution of prisoners, as an example for Grey Worm, that's a pretty powerful thing to have at your disposal. And the fact that Daenerys, the fact that when Daenerys told Jon Snow, it will be a world of mercy, but we have to be unmerciful first before we can build that, says everything that you need to know about why she had to die.
I love that too. What a great line. Oh yeah, we'll have mercy, but I just need to kill some people first.
Exactly.
Yes. Get to the mercy part.
And you know,
that's like saying to your wife, like the woman that you're just about to marry, no, I'm gonna be cheating on you the first 3 years to get to the monogamy part of my marriage. We got to get the cheating part first, the cheating era.
But that line, or those lines, I should say, that whole throne room dialogue and exchange, that to me, that wasn't ham-handed. To me, that was actually really, it was well done. Well done in the sense, I mean, I wish there could have been more, but and I the part where he kills her felt really, I don't know, oversimplified. But the dialogue was actually quite good and very. There's a difference between like the way that an actor delivers a line and the way that you know that the writer intended it. And in this one case, it felt very much like everything sort of came together, and it what mattered was what was spoken. And I think that was actually well done. Even Daenerys's expressions just seemed to match everything that was sort of going on. Like, I mean, she's almost giddy inside about having the Iron Throne and remembering back to when she was a child and couldn't count to 20. And these things matter in the overall scope of how she was behaving. And yet she still couldn't say that there was a place for mercy before the wheel was broken. No, after the wheel's broken, then we can start discussing mercy.
Tell me why people like Sansa.
That's sometimes I think
I'm a fan of Sansa. Maybe I still hold it because how she was in the beginning, but I mean, what does she do to be the Queen of the North? I mean, what, just because she's a Stark? I mean, is that it? Like, the fully deserved.
I don't think that.
You're breaking up. Okay,
I'm back.
There we go.
I think that what has happened is people are so hungry for strong female leads that sometimes I think you can read things into situations and come away with something different than maybe what was intended. But also, I don't think that this is the character's fault, because I think the character of Sansa is actually written pretty good. I like the Sansa character, especially in George Martin's books. But I think that the problem with Sansa is that they don't, first of all, they just don't give her enough to make her convincing as somebody who is sort of the Queen of the North. They don't make her, they don't give her all of that stature. It's like everything is sort of all. Remember last week when I was saying that I really hated the way that they pulled together that whole line about, hey, if all these bad things hadn't happened to me, I wouldn't be as strong as I am, and all of that. And putting that aside, just saying that sort of brings you to where Sansa is. She is the components of all the bad things that have happened to her, instead of being the stately queen that we feel like has earned her place in the North. And that is, fundamentally, I think that's different. Like, you can see all the things that Daenerys has learned over her lifetime trying to, get to the Iron Throne, but you can't really see that with Sansa. And so I don't think it's a fault of Sansa, the character. I think it's a fault of the way that Sansa is written. Does that make sense?
I mean, she's not a real life human being. So, it all goes back to the way she's written. But I don't know. I was very surprised because I didn't talk about the show a lot with a lot of different people until like really in the last couple of years. And then So I have the way that I feel about certain characters, and I was just surprised how many people say how much they love Sansa, and I'm like to me she's so unlikable as a character. I like Arya way better than Sansa. I liked Cersei. I can understand why some people wouldn't like Cersei, but I actually liked her character way better. Uh, like people who like Danny and people who like Sansa was pretty surprising that so many people like. Oh, you're having a microphone issue. Everything okay? Hello, Jen. Jen. Okay, so we're having some technical difficulties. We're waiting for Jen to get back. Just to let people know, of course, you can please get me on Twitter at KenteF.
There we Twitter. Go.
Jen, do we have you back?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised though how many people like Sansa and liked Dany. I mean, I liked Dany at first, but then I would go on to not like her character. So I don't know. I just, when people say, "Oh man, I really like Sansa," she's
but that is, I do think that is that is when I was saying that there's a difference between the way Sansa's written. I think what I was trying to say was there's a difference between the way that Sansa is written in the books and the way that Sansa is written for the series. And I mean, obviously that was going to happen because the source material is missing, but can you still hear me?
Yeah, I hear you.
But I also think that there's a disconnect where people are latching onto anything that shows strength because there are so few sort of women that take on that role, that they latch onto them for perhaps not exactly the right reasons. But I'll tell you what I came up with about Sansa.
Can I answer that real quick? That's just not true on Game of Thrones. There's so many strong women on the show. There's like tons of
you're right.
Strong women on the show.
In Game of Thrones there are. You're right.
There's more strong women on the show than men in the end. So like the guys, like it's funny, they dug up some guys at the end to be on the council, but for the most part the women were pretty much running it, and oddly enough, it's interesting that I think we all assume one of the female characters may end up on the throne. I'm talking about going into the season, but but I just but anyway, so it's interesting that
but you know what? But I also think one other thing. I also think that especially women, as some women, see Sansa as being the quintessential person that gets kicked around and abused, and it doesn't seem like it matters to anyone, and then sort of rises above it in a way that is more like a, hey, I can beat the system, and that's why I'm saying that there's a difference between her rise to power and Daenerys's rise to power. Sansa's rise to power feels a lot more like, I'm not going to let life defeat me. And Daenerys's rise to power feels more purpose-driven. Like there are very specific goals that need to be met. But I think that people like her simply because she is undefeated by life. That I just think that is where that comes from.
But see, okay, Bolton is one thing. So let's annex the Bolton part, right? The Joffrey thing, I never really felt bad for her with Joffrey because very early on, she totally wanted to be the queen, marrying Joffrey and all of that. And that was the thing.
She was a kid. But she was a kid.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
I think it does.
No, we grew up fast over here in Westeros. That was one thing that annoyed the shit out of me with her. That's what turned me off of her character very early on. And so everything, and then when it didn't go her way, then she was like, oh wow, I'm I'm this victim. I'm like, what? You signed up for that. And then, Bolton, that was different because, that was, she was violated by him. And then she ended up getting revenge or whatever. But, I just don't see her as this great character. She was a mess to me. In the end, they basically have her, where she's all of a sudden, it's like, to me, she's like, nothing she did, like Arya, trained and did all of this stuff, and always, and she. One thing I loved about, I think the reason why I loved Arya way more than I loved Sansa was that Arya was always loyal to House Stark. I felt like there was no kind of mixed feelings or whatever. It was always, that's my family and I'm riding with my family. Whereas it felt like Sansa in the beginning was like, well, I mean, I'll go over here. And then when they started treating her bad, then it was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna start. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's the thing that annoyed me about her. And then when when people, like, I don't see her as strong at all.
Well, you won't get any argument from me at all. And like I said, the people that we like to see rise to power are the people who have somehow, quote unquote, earned it. And I don't care whether earning it. What's that?
Women, the one that had to watch her daughter die the poison at the hands of Cersei's kiss. The women of Dorne, them was some strong chicks. You know what I'm saying? Like they.
Yeah, and as far as we know, she could still be alive in the basement.
I know, right? Because I never even thought about that. And by the way, she is very attractive. She was on Luther season 1, and she was also on the show Rome. The woman that plays the mother, I can't remember what her character's name, but she's very beautiful. That woman. But anyway, I digress.
All of those Vipers were amazing.
The main Viper though, she was a beautiful woman.
Yeah, she was totally wasted on Prince Oberyn. I agree.
Prince Oberyn was cool. I like Prince Oberyn. Prince Oberyn was a great. He served a purpose, but his death was so glorious. But man, you kind of wish that he was maybe on like a full season or something. But kudos to the actor Pablo Pascal. He's sure. He's a really good actor, and he's really taken that, and his career is like really amazing. He has like a really good career, and he's always solid in everything he's in. He's a good actor. So.
Just before we sat down to watch Game of Thrones, this very last episode, we had about why we felt like we have sat through 8 seasons of this show and why we have been so compelled to follow the story, aside from the fact that pop culture basically demands it. I think that what we came up with was if you look at everything in a macrocosm, what you find is that there is a lot of excellence to this show. There are so many pieces of this show that have been excellently done from a technical perspective to the actors, to some really brilliant pieces of cinematography and all kinds of things in between. The reason that we have all sat through 8 seasons of this show is because we continued from the first time that you get hooked on Game of Thrones is because there is something incredibly compelling about all of these different people. Just going back and remembering sort of some of the early performances by Cersei, it's amazing that at season 8, although they didn't write her a really great piece for season 8, she still had commanding presence. And that is truly rare for almost any I can think of, except, truly the greats like Breaking Bad and The Sopranos, and where you have such incredible magnetism from the characters all the way through. So, yes, maybe there's some Sansas, and yes, maybe there's some some characters that are not as rememberable as others. But for the most part, when Jorah left and then came back, he was still just as strong as he was when he left. And I feel like that is a credit to the writing, because the characters did maintain, if nothing else, they did maintain a sense of continuity to who they had been written to be. Does that, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The only one that honestly to me doesn't make any sense, and only in season 8 it make sense, is one, the quick turn of Daenerys, although I could see that the turn was probably going to be inevitable. I just didn't like how quick it was. But the one that really doesn't make sense to me is the whole Jon Snow character arc from basically season 7. I don't understand it. I just don't get it.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I most certainly agree with you. I'll say this. This needs to be said. This is kind of off the subject, right? This is off the subject, but I feel like it's something that needs to be said.
Okay.
All the people out there who think that Game of Thrones, like I hear people say this phrase, maybe you've heard it. And same thing they say with Lord of the Rings. You know, back in the Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones times, there was no Game of Thrones. Or like, there's people who actually believe like this is a historical type thing. Like, there's people that believe that this is like some sort of documentary or something, or you know, some sort of, you know,
like it's based on medieval history or something.
And I'm like, no, like I actually got in an argument with someone who said the phrase, you know, back in the Game of Thrones times, there's no period of human history where there were the Ice King and dragons and, you know, like, I mean, obviously there's fictional lore, but it's not, no, there was no Game of Thrones times. This is not, you know, this wasn't, you know, how, you know, we got our current map, you know, before it was, you know, like, no. And it's so funny. Well, so many people, there's people that literally believe that.
So, okay. So I read a series called Crown of Stars, which is by one of my favorite authors. Her name is Kate Elliott. And it's very, I won't call it similar to Game of Thrones, but it has that Game of Thrones feeling. In fact, anybody who's sort of into that kind of high fantasy epic, it is actually amazingly written, and it has all of those overtones to it. But the critical piece to it is that it is written in an economic feudal society. And that's where I feel like people forget that feudal society is not the fantasy, is not, there was a time that we lived in a feudal economy, right? I mean, there were knights, but this is such a gross misrepresentation of what feudal economy was even like. And also, in fact, this is one of the things that because we watched the last episode. We watched episode the prior one, the one where she burns the city, the bells. We watched that before we watched this, and as she was sort of aerially looking down at King's Landing, I thought, wow, that doesn't look like any medieval town I have ever seen ever. Because it's just way too built up, because it's just, I mean, clearly this is just a fantasy thing. But you're right. It's funny the way that people take it as, oh, this must be based on history. So they just threw in the dire wolves and the Ice King and the dragon, but everything else feels pretty authentic. And it's like, no. Not even close.
Some people think that's part of it too.
Wow. That's kind of scary.
Yeah, it is very scary. So I felt like, hey, Coco.
Just because they make a series of something doesn't mean it's based on
right. People think it's real. Yeah. I saw a Coco on Twitter just now, and Nicole, and she was saying she seemed like she wasn't a fan of this finale either. So you're in company, Nicole. But I don't know, man. I just feel like this left a lot to be desired. It's unfortunate because you know it deserved better. You know,
So you know how you know that you're not expecting much from a series finale?
Mhm.
The way that you know it is when you see the preview for His Dark Materials and you're more excited about His Dark Materials as because it was an extended preview of it than you are for the series finale of the show that you've been watching for almost a decade. I mean, I realized in that moment how little I had really expected from this episode, and yet I still didn't feel like it met even the minor expectations that I sort of set out for what I hoped the season finale would be. It's funny because, again, my son was saying that he felt like what had happened was they spent so much time on the what could possibly come next and sort of tying up so many of the loose ends that they forgot that there was something bigger that should have happened. That, as a series finale, it should have left us with a sense of breathlessness, and instead it just made us sigh. And I felt like that was actually a pretty good representation. That's sort of how I felt too.
Well, and welcome, Nicole. How you doing?
Hey, I am underwhelmed.
Yes.
I
I am
think you're in good
underwhelmed.
company.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been saying that really since the first episode for season 8. Um, it, I knew something was off with the way the direction was going with the dialogue. I was like, this dialogue is not hitting right now. I was like, well, they are out of source material, but by the second episode, I knew it wasn't going to get better. And then as the season continued, I was like, now they're using action to replace dialogue.
Yes,
And,
yes, you're
and
totally
vacant
right.
vacant stares to kind of emulate what they're trying to convey. And it's like, no, you need dialogue for that. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
for a series that has been heavily based on dialogue, and then for it to be uh, for lack of a better phrase, kind of cheap dialogue. Um, it just really wasn't hitting. Like even like this last episode with them around the table with Tyrion and Bronn and everybody else, that just came across so cheap and juvenile. Like it had no real character, no real substance to what they were trying to say. And I was just like, I am beyond. I was, I haven't used this word except for this season. And the word I'm about to say is fuckery.
Yes.
I have been saying fuckery for this entire season, and this is the only show that I've used it for. This show has been, or this season has been complete and utter fuckery. And I've been saying it with the same voice of, this is Sparta,
Right.
this is Sparta. I've been saying the same way, this is fuckery the entire way.
I'll say this. If the only sin of this season was the final episode,
It would have been okay.
yeah, I would have been like,
Yeah.
but I think the other 5 episodes, they were so underwhelming that it just made it even worse. Because I think most of us would have taken this final episode as, okay, not net.
Like a farewell goodbye. Yeah. But no, the entire season.
Right. So when they missed on the other episodes, like royally, it just compounds how bad it just made this final episode that much worse, because you're hoping for a last gasp of something, and really you knew you wasn't going to get it.
Of course. Also, and I think also one of the things that actually makes this perversely worse is that the last episode we know was actually directed by the lead writers. And so because of that, it just sort of makes you go, well, so you had total creative control out of the whole thing, and this is what you came up with? I mean, it's not, and again, I do oftentimes, and again, pulling this out to a macrocosm, or pulling it into a macrocosm, I should say, I am oftentimes absolutely astounded by the amount of money that they are able to sort of come up with and use. It is absolutely unbelievably amazing, and they do some amazing things in the moment. But when you pull back from it, it's like looking at the beautiful leg of a centipede, and the leg is so gorgeous. And actually, centipedes' legs are kind of cool, but when you look at the whole thing, it's a centipede. It's like, ew, this is really gross. That is what this. I feel that sense of what has small moments of wonderment when you pull back from it is really just sort of grotesque.
Yeah. I mean, it's like what's so funny is it's almost like I feel like the Wizard of Oz, like the curtain got pulled back and you like really see the emperor has no clothes. It's like you're just like
wow, there were so many mixed metaphors in that. It was crazy. That was
right.
That's what you call a Malafor. That's a Malafor.
It's Malafor, right?
Yeah.
It's like, at first you're like, oh, these guys are really good. You're like, wow, these guys really got it. And then when they ran out of book material, it's like, these guys don't know what the hell they do. It's like,
the thing is, I thought season 7, even without source material, season 7 was still fairly decent. Like, no, I can still go back and watch episodes.
I did like season 7.
There's no material for season 7, but they did pretty good considering they didn't have anything. Now this season, I was like, okay, I put it like this. Now that I found out, even just now with you saying they directed even like the final episodes, I have no intention of going to go see Star Wars whatsoever. If they are directing this, I have no desire to see them do Star Wars. And they're doing a franchise.
I'll tell you one thing. They really need, and I say this with all honest sincerity, they really, really need to work on their transitional cuts. And I don't mean this like to sound like some kind of like I'm critiquing the technology to the point of, circumventing what the story is. But honestly, this episode was so jarring because of the way that they did their transitions, where the story pause moments to move from basically scene to scene or piece to piece within this episode was so awful. It lacked any kind symmetry. Of, I'm sorry, say that again.
Symmetry. It's just disjointed.
Well, it lacked a cohesive sense of, okay, logically this is what would come next. And don't get me wrong, because I'm not talking about the transitions like, camera up into this or camera down into this or, fit into none of that. I'm talking about just for the moments that you're supposed to take a breath story-wise. Their transitions were either incredibly long, which is also very jarring, or so short that you don't even get a chance to digest what has just happened before you are thrown into the next piece. And that we're not in that kind of storytelling. That's storytelling for the battles. That's storytelling for what we saw last episode. This episode, if they really wanted to, it should have been a pacing that would have made a little bit more cohesive sense. And instead what we got was sometimes it was cohesive, sometimes it was just incredibly jarring is probably the best word I can come up with. It just felt intrusive. Like, what are you guys doing? That to me is the biggest problem that they have right now, other than their storytelling.
I found it just outlandish. Like, for instance, Grey Worm. I was just like, who are you to be telling that somebody needs to be punished? You have no leader. What are you talking about? Are you going to say somebody's got to be punished? You're a a leader of an army, but you have no queen. You have no king. What do you?
But I don't see though. But to be honest with you, I felt like we're assuming he must have walked in and. Obviously, Jon Snow confessed, right? I see Grey Worm killing him right away. Like,
well, Grey Worm. So Grey Worm was confirmed before she died by Daenerys as Master of War, master of the armies and whatever. And I think what they were trying to say, but see, this is the problem with sloppy storytelling. I think what they were trying to say was the armies accepted Daenerys's last words as ironclad law. So Grey Worm was in charge until there was some other leadership available. And specifically about Jon Snow, I think what they were trying to say was the Dothraki and the Unsullied couldn't let him go, that he had to somehow, but the reason they hadn't executed him is because they hadn't come up with, this is what we should actually do. There was no resolution to that.
You missed what I'm saying. You missed what I'm saying. I'm saying that when it comes to Daenerys and Missandei, how you say her name?
Missandei.
Like, it's emotion. So he loves those two women the most. So I don't see him.
Right,
all that goes out the window. If him saying I killed her, I just see him trying to kill. Like, to me, I thought they were going to fight.
I don't know. I don't see that,
because he was so tunnel vision with killing all the Lannister armies, or I should say soldiers.
Yeah, he just killed him.
But that was at Daenerys's request. That was at Daenerys's request, and I do see that Grey Worm was far more of a leader isn't even the right word. For him, order is everything. And even in the moment when he broke ranks with Jon, he was not breaking ranks with Daenerys. I've actually had time to think about that.
No. You missed what I'm saying. I'm saying it's like his rudder is gone now that she's not there. So
I don't think that's true.
Yeah, can I finish? Let me make the point.
Okay.
But what I'm saying is, I felt like, to me, it would have been more believable if we saw that moment where maybe like he should have walked in as the dragon was taking her off, and then I felt like, I just don't see him saying, okay, well, you know what, turn around, let's put these handcuffs on you. I just don't see that, especially how emotional
I didn't see it either. I was just like, you got Jon looking like he made grandma's cookies in this room with all the long hair and stuff. And it's like, how could Grey Worm not snap? He lost Missandei,
right,
and he snapped on all the soldiers. He went hard. He threw his stuff down. He was like, y'all still dying. And for him to kill Daenerys, that was like his last connection to Missandei.
Right.
For Jon to kill Daenerys,
he was just so composed about it. It didn't seem like with me.
Daenerys, he got Missandei.
I don't. In this one instance, I think you guys are wrong. I think Grey Worm is at his heart and always has been one of the Unsullied. His identity is not with Daenerys. His identity is not with Missandei. His identity is as one of the Unsullied. That is his identity, and therefore, in that moment, or whatever we didn't see with Jon, his sense of loyalty was still to the Unsullied, even if Daenerys was the biggest part of, creating the Unsullied army. It was honestly a sense of duty and loyalty to them that he didn't his hand, both with Tyrion and with Jon. But to me, it makes sense.
He didn't keep his hand with Missandei, because when those soldiers threw their swords down, he attacked them.
Yes, but again, that was because we understand. We understand from the scene where in this episode they are going to execute prisoners, that Daenerys told him even before the battle that all enemies, I forgot how he said it, but basically anybody who followed Cersei, anyone who chose to serve with Cersei, is an enemy of hers, and therefore had to die. And so I think that there is, again, I think this all could have been cleared up with a tiny bit of dialogue, and it could have happened exactly at the time that Jon Snow and Grey Worm were talking. And if they had just clarified that little bit of dialogue, it would have made everything. But this was sloppy storytelling again, and here we are. See, we're having a conversation about a dynamic that I think existed but was never spoken, and that is a problem.
Okay, so do you think Jon killing Daenerys, did that automatically make him an enemy?
I don't know if it made him an enemy. Once Daenerys is gone, then I don't know if that does.
Yes, that makes me an enemy.
The person that gave you an order. I mean, that sounds like an enemy to me.
But I don't know. See, I think this is a little bit more convoluted. I feel like we are making this more convoluted than it actually is, in the sense that I do acknowledge that it is sloppy telling, but I think that that there is a reach here, which is basically that Grey Worm is at his to his core, he is one of the Unsullied. He's not just Daenerys's puppet. He's not just anything. He is one of the Unsullied. And I feel like, what did we see? What did we see in that scene? Wait, what did we see in that scene when Daenerys walks to the stairs and she's looking out at the armies? What did we see? We saw the Dothraki and everybody else sort of in the background, and they were totally unorganized and they were completely doing their own thing. So if you want to make an argument that somebody should have killed Jon Snow, it would have been the Dothraki, not the Unsullied. Because look at the Unsullied. They are in perfect lines. They are in perfect discipline. They are going to do exactly what Grey Worm tells them to do.
Right, let me ask you this question. So say like Grey Worm was in there when it happened. And when they hugged and kissed, and then he finds out that she had, when he pulls back, you find out that she was stabbed in the belly. You're telling me that he would have just said, all right, come here. I'm going to arrest you for that.
No, no, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, first of all, we don't know how much time went by before they found her or whatever.
No, I'm giving you another scenario where he was there when it happened.
In that case, I think a crime of passion could absolutely have happened. But I think that's exactly what it would have been. It would have been a crime of passion. And so his whatever intellect Grey Worm embodies as being the Unsullied first wouldn't have had time to kick in.
I mean, it's the crime of passion.
Let me disagree with this statement. I think it was episode 2 when he was talking to Missandei, and he says, where do you want to go? And she's like, I want to go back to Nod. And he was like, yeah, once we get done with her business, I'm out. So I think he took a departure from the image of being Unsullied because he wanted a new life.
But that's before, right? But that was before. That was before she died.
Right, but he had made that transition. So
I don't know.
Well, I mean, it's fair to it's okay to disagree. Yeah, I saw a different take from him. That
also, I think also I have to say this just as sort of a part of the cautionary tale of how I view Game of Thrones altogether. I've read everything up to where Martin is right now. So, everything that's been published. And so sometimes I'm colored a little bit in my understanding of who the characters are by what I've read about them or what I haven't read about them. And sometimes I get the feeling that what we read into these characters, I think I can sort of understand where the writers are trying to go with them, and I can see that background, but I can't. In this particular case, I understand why you guys disagree with me, but I feel like this is still where I understand things. I don't think that we would have needed to see that scene with Daenerys at the top of the stairs addressing the Unsullied army and the Dothraki for just Tyrion to throw down his hand sigil. I feel like that was not the intent of this. The intent of this was to show us that the army was still very much a vital thing, and that it had order and discipline, even if it had its own order and discipline, like the Dothraki doing their own Dothraki thing. but that it very much was still a living, breathing unit. And so with Grey Worm being attached to that, I don't see Grey Worm just abandoning all of those people and going, yeah, I'm just going to do whatever I want to do for my own sake. I don't know. I just don't see
But
that.
that's not how I view it. I view it as it's like think about this. Do you remember The Last Jedi?
Yeah. Sadly.
Okay. When they killed Snoke, what did his men do? They went into fight mode. Now they all got their ass whooped, but the point is, their leader was dead, and they tried to avenge their leader's death right when he was murdered. And I feel like that seems like more what would happen to me is kind of like going into that mode.
Yeah, I think so too. I think he would have snapped. But the whole season, this is riddled with just poor execution of the dialogue. I take that back. No, because they did the best they could with the dialogue. I think it was just poorly implemented.
It was sloppy storytelling.
Yeah, exactly. Was I going to go with this? It was just the whole season was just
the thing is, beginning at the end of season 7, right? Because I saw this coming. I feel like I saw this coming. I was looking back at my show notes, the notes that I sort of take on all the series that I like, and the last thing that sort of jumps out to me as, okay, this is when I really started thinking that things were going bad, is there have been moments, or there were plenty of moments, I should say, in season 7 where I felt like, it's not just that this isn't going where I expected it to go. It's that whatever end game they have in mind, they are not doing anything to lay down foundation to get there.
Right.
And that is, to me, that is such a huge problem, because look, nobody likes to think that they are, dumb, or that, they can't figure something out, or that they don't see a wider allegory. And I feel like that's one of the things that sort of embraced everybody through Game of Thrones altogether through all these seasons, is that from the very beginning up until probably season 6 or so, it was very concretely laid out. We saw a lot of things that, even if they didn't make total sense to us, they made sense in the moment. We got glimpses of things that we understood were going to happen later, when Sam kills the White Walker with the obsidian. All of these things sort of made a bit of sense, right? We kind of got a hint of what might come later. But here, we have so much that is going on that was never properly set down foundationally. And even if it makes sense in the moment, it is in the grand arc of the story. And so in this season, in season 8 altogether, what we have is a story that, even if it could have existed the way that it existed at the close of this episode, it doesn't make a whole lot of satisfaction sense to us, because the foundation for what's here wasn't laid out properly. Now, you can argue that it was laid out.
Right, 100%. I think you are right. I think they destroyed character arcs they took 7 seasons to build in a matter of 1-2 episodes.
Because it was no longer efficient for them to use those characters. I mean, to me, the greatest sin of Game of Thrones actually is the abandonment whole cloth of what I feel like was the primary lore of Game of Thrones, which is that complicated mythology of the old gods and the new gods. That is just completely gone. It's just totally gone. And there's no reason for it to be gone. I realize that it is hard to put in, because you're going in a direction that is all about the episodic violence of claiming the throne and battles and political machinations. But they did it effectively in the first couple of seasons. They just abandoned it, and that actually bothers me. But it's this, to me, that's just the most obvious of it. It's not the end of it. That's just one of the most obvious things. They've done it with so many storylines.
But also, though, to be fair to them, I can't believe I'm about to say this, is that they were in world building mode, right? and then now to finish it off, you're in game mode, which the show is just gonna naturally be different.
So just give, you know what? It literally would have taken maybe 1 minute of dialogue in a couple of different episodes over the past 3 seasons to make it make sense. And instead, they chose to just completely abandon it. So, yes, you're right. This resolution mode is not the same as world building mode. That is definitely for sure. But there is no excuse for abandoning a storyline, or I shouldn't even say a storyline, for abandoning an entire world that was created simply because you don't know how to bring it to resolution. That, again, I feel like that is just sloppy storytelling.
I'm totally mad at you, Jen.
Why?
Because you're making me defend those guys, and I hate defending those guys.
I don't even say how you can defend them. I mean,
I'm not. I'm only defending one aspect of the thing. Is like it isn't going to be what seasons 1 through 4 or 5 or 6 is going to be. But the thing that I don't expect it to have the same kind of flow. It's going to be a different flow because we're getting to the resolutions. But I just want to like it though. You know what I'm saying? Like that's my problem with it. Because
they destroyed the character arcs. They lost the core of the characters. John can't think worth a darn. He cannot. It's like do you really have to have Arya explain stuff to you? Like you're the rightful heir to the throne. You're not going to last long.
See, what was missing? What was missing out of the entire Jon Snow arc was inner monologue. And I'm not saying that there's any way to bring inner monologue into a Game of Thrones, but that's the problem with having characters that just have what we perceive as just inner monologue of some kind of fight that we can never hear. If Jon Snow had articulated to other people the stuff that was going on inside of his head, I feel like maybe some of it would have made more sense, but it doesn't because we can't hear his thoughts.
Exactly. Like, when she was kissing him, in the previous episode, and she's just like, I'm just your queen. He's like, well, you're also my aunt. Something like that. Just to show that he's having difficulty on a romantic level. That would have just been so evident. Like, you're still my aunt. We're family. From the north, we don't do stuff like that. Just something.
And she should have been like,
just like he's scared of it now. Just like
she should have said, "Well, here in King's Landing, family's fair game."
I feel like that's what she was telling him in the throne room. Hey, if Cersei and Jaime did it, we can definitely do it.
Well, yeah.
I want to say one good thing about this episode because, well, actually, yeah, I'm just going to say it about this episode. Although I think season 8 has been pretty strong for this particular character. So, although I don't like all the choices that they had Tyrion do, I will say that in this episode, I did feel like the character of Tyrion was at I guess both humbled and understood that his overreach was not. That not just were there consequences for his overreach, but that his overreach was actually a character flaw, and like from the deepest sense of profound, I wish that there was a way to take this back, was conveyed. I did really feel that for him. I liked that the just everything that goes along with, especially Tyrion's conversation with Jon Snow about why Daenerys is not a benevolent dictator. Why we cheered for her when she crucified the slavers. Why we cheered for her when she liberated all the people. There's an interesting sort of dynamic to be had there, which I feel like was done really well. But you know who didn't give any information in that scene about how they felt about it was Jon Snow. So it was just sort of all about Tyrion. Yeah.
He said 2 things this whole season. I don't want it. What was the other one? I don't know. It was just
okay. So
I don't want to sleep with my auntie.
Okay. So to go back.
Season.
So to go back to one of our all-time favorite lines in Game of Thrones, we can all now say without any hesitation and with 100% perfect certainty that you know nothing, Jon Snow.
Yes.
And still, he still knows absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
He's walking up north past the wall because he doesn't want to do the Night's Watch. And it's just like,
you know what? Maybe they are the right people to do Star Wars because they build up they make relationships believable, like Danny and the fact that they love each other. Danny and Jon Snow, they're very similar to the love story in episode 2 of Star Wars between Anakin and
Padme. Oh God.
Right? Yeah. Like I'm shocked they didn't throw in the "I love the sand. It's so coarse" line in there. I mean,
yes, it's not smooth like you. It's
right.
it's terrible.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they are the right people to do it. I don't know, but it's like all of a sudden they just seen each other and they was in love, like, and it was just like, okay, all right, I guess. But you know what? To be honest with you, and kudos to Jen, because I was willing to give all kind of passes leading into this season. I gave so many passes. I gave a pass to the teleporting. I gave a pass to the love story all of a sudden that's being interjected that didn't make no damn sense. I gave all kind of passes because when you see a dragon being reanimated into an ice dragon, that's pretty awesome and blowing up the gate, of the wall. But this season, all my passes are gone. All my passes are gone. Because Jen was calling it out. And I was all defending it. I was like, because at least
remember
I was entertained. It was some fuckery, but it was entertaining fuckery.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, okay, you know what? That ice dragon, that was dope, and the fights, and I was like, okay, it's not as great as it once was, but there was some cool shit. This season, it was almost like, I mean, oh my god, it was so like that first episode. I even gave that kind of a pass, right?
And that was my indicator. I was like, something's terribly wrong here.
I felt it.
Like an episode. Not serious. This is garbage.
I felt it, but I was nice to that episode because it was cool to see all the characters come back and all of that. And I'm like, okay, they're just setting it up. Okay, I'm hoping, right? I'm hoping. I've literally felt like a battered woman, a battered wife who just hopes that I won't get abused anymore. And then finally, I just feel like, you know what? I'm pushing him down a flight of stairs. Like I'm pushing my husband down the flight of stairs. That's how I feel with this season, because it was just like, so the second episode, I was like, I didn't really like it that much. There was some okay moments. I'm like, they're just getting it ready. Okay, 3, we all knew 3 was going to be the big one. And then that's when I turned. Because that episode 3 was hot garbage, and it was
first
just,
I couldn't see it.
You didn't even see it.
My screen.
Like,
So
what kind of dummy? Explain to me, what kind of dummy thinks not seeing the freaking episode you spent $300 million on is a good idea? Like, what kind of mind thinks that? I mean, I'm sitting there like, unless they were trying to cover up some bad shit. Maybe that's what maybe they said they make it really dark so they won't see our fuck ups. I don't know. But and then the Ex Machina over and over and over, people covered with walkers, and then all of a sudden they cut away, and then when they cut back, it's like 3. It went from like 300 to 3. Just it's like, what the hell? And then and I didn't like the ending of how it all got resolved. We kind of went back and forth on that. And then, it just was downhill. It's very disappointing. It's
a little bit like I described this to Tristan. This was at the beginning of this episode. I said that this season is a little bit like if you take out your trash and your trash is arranged in Starry, Starry Night, you go, oh my God, this is beautiful, but it's still trash, and you still throw it away. Because it doesn't have any inherent value to it, even though it looks pretty. And it did look pretty. I mean, just remembering back to Daenerys's a lot of the Daenerys scenes in this episode were absolutely stunning. They were gorgeously shot, but it's still just it's like it's like you just can't dress up the flaws that bad storytelling. I shouldn't say bad storytelling, but incomplete storytelling.
Let me ask a question. All right.
The show had both. The show always carried both. It always had substance and it had show. So it was a hand in hand type of deal. Now it's come almost like that one director. I call him the guy that did
Michael Bay.
Yeah, Michael Bay. I call him Boom Boom Bay. Thank you. Hit it on the head. Boom Boom Bay.
At least do that right, though.
He does everything with flash and show, break out the explosions, all of it. But at the end of the day, it had a flimsy foundation.
Except Black Sails.
But you know what? When we talk about the nature of a great show, we'll first start with a movie. What's one of the reasons why The Usual Suspects, it's a movie, stood the test of time? I mean, besides just being a great story, what was significant about that film? That the ending, right? It stuck.
Yeah, definitely the twist ending. Yeah.
Okay, now let's go to TV shows. Why is Breaking Bad considered such a great television show? To this day, people still talk about it fondly because they did what? They stuck the ending, right?
They definitely did. That was a great show. That was a way to end the show. That was amazing. I was like, oh my God.
I think that the problem with the ending here is they didn't know how to end it, and I say that being. I'm really serious. They really didn't know how to end it. I mean, I think
my point is, this is going to mess with the legacy, I think, of the show, because I tell you, Dexter was a great show until the last season. You know, like the last season was hot garbage, and the finale was more of the same. Now, this finale was way better than the Dexter one, but that's not saying much, you know. But
yeah, and just so that everybody, just so that everybody knows, just from like where I sit on this, I don't think that this last episode was completely without value. I don't think that it, and I also don't think that the entire season was without value. There are definitely lots of good pieces to it. But I think that you're right. One of the hardest parts of storytelling is knowing how to end the story so that you feel a sense of both satisfaction and resolution. And I don't feel like we got either with this.
No. But you know what? I'm okay with open questions. You know, like I'm totally fine with open questions. Like I don't think everything should be 100% wrapped up. That's fine. But my thing is, you know, just make it entertaining. You know, make it make sense. And you know what? You don't have to be awesome, but be good. You know, and I honestly, I think what's a tack below good, because it wasn't
mediocre.
Yeah, it was mediocre, I would say.
No, I think it was flat out terrible. I'm not even going to give it mediocre because that's too much of a compliment. I think the entire season was hot garbage. When I say fuckery, it is fuckery.
I'm not quite as hard on it. I think it was fair.
Yeah,
go
ahead. No, the reason I say mediocre was the thing that gives it saving grace is they did things in this season that really no other TV show has done. So you got to kind of give them that. And that's me being fair. They did some things that you just don't see on television as far as what they did with budget and, you know, scope and all of that. So,
and just the pop culture value alone. Yeah, I mean, I feel like we haven't seen this in a long time.
Just on season 8. I think season 8 is absolute utter garbage and fuckery, and I don't feel it's rewatchable.
It's not.
I just can't. It's just not rewatchable because they destroy character arcs. They carefully crafted 7 seasons into making, and they destroyed them all in like maybe an episode or two. And it like they did devastating things to Tyrion. I was just like, are you serious? Like, how do you have him in the crypts? And I understand because he's the hand, keep him safe. But he's down there and he's no weapon. Now, Tyrion is, he's not like a fighter, but he's not a coward either. He will fight. And have him down there with just a jug of wine and then hiding behind a tombstone when these whites break out and he's not doing anything. I could see him in previous season grabbing Sansa's weapon and at least trying to make an attempt. He is hiding. It's like they destroy his character. It's like once he stopped getting sex, he's worthless. It's just like, what are you doing?
Well, to be fair, I feel like that's how I would be too. So I probably wouldn't be any good either. So
I don't know if I totally agree with that either. I definitely didn't like that episode. I shouldn't even say I didn't like that episode. I didn't like parts of that episode. I did not like how they treated Tyrion in that sense, but I don't feel like that destroyed his character. What I feel like really destroyed his character was the excuse me, the constant not being able to make up his mind, the constant back and forth with whether he was the second guessing, he wasn't
able to give good advice.
Well, right.
I know things. He was always on top of his game. He was always a thinker, very calculating.
Well, I don't know. See, that's the thing. The thing is, I think they didn't do Tyrion a disservice all the way through. There were just moments of them doing a disservice. So I don't feel like they destroyed his character arc as much as they just dishonored it a couple of times, and really then it starts to not make sense. But again, I'll go back to this and I'll say that one of the biggest issues that I have with this last episode is that sometimes things, and Kente, you said it, right? Sometimes things don't have to be resolved, but they have to have some kind of
closure.
Closure, and at the very least, there has to be a willingness by the writer to say, we're moving on. We've come to the end of this. So maybe something else will happen after this, and maybe not. And that's where they were trying to go by intersplicing all of the Stark kids doing all of the Stark kids things. And I liked that, but it didn't feel to me like we had any moments of, oh, okay, I get it. I see what you're trying to close out here, because there were just too many things to close out, because nothing had been prepared ahead of time, I think. Also, more thing. The one thing, and I know this sounds petty, that was just so ridiculous to me. And because I loved the visual of Drogon basically flaming the Iron Throne. What I feel like we go back and forth with these dragons between they are highly instinctual killers and have more intellect than we understand, and they are simply puppets that you can kind of use to your own advantage if you're a Targaryen or if you can warg or whatever. But that little tiny piece is sort of episodically. This is why I feel like Game of Thrones started to fail, because it was all those little things that just don't quite make sense. Why did Drogon target the Iron Throne? Not that I didn't love it, right? Yay, the Iron Throne is gone. I mean, it felt actually really good. But why did he even do that? Did he somehow know that was Daenerys's thing? That no, of course he didn't.
I know where you're getting at, because I was just like, okay, if she can't have it, nobody can have it, and you're fighting over this stupid chair, and this is what happened. This serves you nothing.
But are the dragons that smart? I mean, we
He
haven't
is
been
saying
led.
that he's like,
No,
yeah, so
that was so cool. I give him a pass on that one. That was cool.
Yeah, yes, I did say that I thought it was visually amazing. I mean, I actually was blown away, and I'm telling you,
I wish
we
that
all
was
sat
there.
here and applauded.
I wish that was their worst sin.
like,
I wish it was
no.
the worst sin of the episode was that they would be doing pretty well if that was their worst sin. But you know, it is what it is. But I'll tell you this: this is what angers me. When I watched the first season of this show, not even halfway through the season, I remember turning to I can't remember who I was watching it with, but I remember turning to my friend and saying, Peter Dinklage is going to win the Emmy for this. Like, it was evident. Like, if you watch that first season, he had a great character. His role was amazing.
He was awesome before.
He won that in 3 or 4 episodes, right?
Yeah.
And then, to be honest with you, his character always interesting, but it was never written in that first season quite as good as the first. In this season, even though he's amazing, he didn't stop being great. His material was at lesser,
right?
It was good in 4. It was good in 4. That's when he was on trial for killing Joffrey. It was good for 4.
Right.
It was after that, once he got kidnapped and then went to be with Daenerys, that's when things started falling off. They stopped using his skill set. Same thing with Varys. It's like, how do you plan on going into a war? You don't have any intel on Cersei. You're not trying to, like, he's suggesting, let's try to have a way without killing King's Landing. Let's think of a way. Now, one time did he talk about using the tunnels, like spending like special ops in there to capture Cersei. At no point in time did he use his skill set to have alternatives. I drink and I know things fell really flat, really quick. So like you have a room full of advisors and you're not talking to any of them. You're not using that one skill set. It's like, how does Cersei have intel on your dragons coming in, and Varys has his little spies everywhere, and still you don't know about the Scorpions, you don't know about the Iron Fleet, you don't know anything. And that's why I'm just like, they're killing character arcs. It's like,
well, but you know what? But you know what? I can see a world of this storytelling. And again, I realize that I'm not involved in the creative aspect of anything on this scope, right? So I understand that decisions have to be made. So I completely honor the process by which writers come up with ideas that then get put into play and dialogue is added and whatever, right? Okay, I'll honor that process. But what I see that has happened here is any one of the things that we have been talking about that have bothered us throughout the last couple of seasons could have easily been clarified with simply a little bit more dialogue where it was needed, or a little bit more visual narrative where it was necessary. And so the fault of why Game of Thrones doesn't work in this season, and in my opinion last season too, is because the narrative sort of fell in on itself. That is, they built in the, I don't know if you guys have ever seen or read Pillars of the Earth, but basically they start out by building this magnificent cathedral. It is absolutely gorgeous, and they are building to the sky. And they don't understand that the structure of the roof is where all of the weight is really being held, and they can't get the load-bearing pieces in place properly. So the whole thing, as magnificent as it is, with stained glass windows and gorgeous marble work and sculptures of everything and relics of saints even, it doesn't save them because the roof, which is the most utilitarian thing of the entire process, can't hold the weight and it falls in. And that's what this reminds me of. The beauty of it is completely marred because the story can't hold the weight of what is supposed to basically cover everything within. And that is, I feel like with just a couple of additions, with just a few small things, they could have easily fixed this. But there's a part of me that thinks that these writers, I'm sorry, I know that this just sounds like sour grapes, but there's a part of me that thinks that these writers have a massive hubris problem where they've taken this magnificent story and they, I think, thought that they were adding their own magnificent to it, but what they really did was just add weight that the story couldn't bear.
How I see it is this. And I read someplace online, and I was like, yeah, that does make sense. Instead of having the characters feed the story, they had the story feed the character. And that's why everything was so rushed. Everything just seemed like it wasn't a natural flow of how the scene should be, how the story should play out. It was like, we want this plot point, this plot point, this plot point to happen here, and so give your character lines to make it happen, instead of there being like a natural progression to it, and then to cover the silence of not having the dialogue, they put in these extensive action sequences that were, at the end of the day, boring.
Well, so there's kind of a golden grail of storytelling, which in one of the central tenets of it is show, don't tell. But in this particular issue, or in this particular series, because we have political machinations, because we have such intricate concepts to convey, there has to be a lot more tell than show. And so it sort of upends the standard storytelling practice that I feel like we've all become very accustomed to. But I also think that what they forgot, sort of, mid-season, or I should say mid-series, is that part of what made Game of Thrones so amazing was the tell, not just the show. And the moment that they tried to do everything in a grand visual structure and didn't pay as close attention to what characters were saying and why, they lost in the weeds, so to speak, a central core part of what made Game of Thrones great. And it takes a while.
They lost the core of the characters.
It does take a while. I mean, if you've ever been lost someplace, it's not like you set out, you think where you're going, and it's easy to turn around and see where you've been, and you just keep going, and you're like, yeah, I can remember I passed that tree. I mean, it takes a while and it's complicated, but when you're lost, it is so clear that you are lost. And why HBO or somebody, well, maybe not HBO, but why somebody wasn't telling them at season 6, guys, you need to do something different here to get this back in line, is, I don't know. It's again, I just feel like this is sort of
2016. That would have been season 7. That they weren't going to do any more seasons besides 8. So
they had plenty of time.
Oh, of course, but I don't think they didn't announce it until 2016, and so they had already either done season 7 or were getting ready to complete season 7.
Yes, but creatively somebody had to have seen the advanced material. I mean, creatively somebody has to be. It's not like they can just premiere it on HBO and that's the first time everybody sees it. Right?
The geniuses, that's why. And the show and the best that it ever done. So you got to get out their way and let these geniuses do their thing.
Very
quick,
stable.
Can you guys see my screen?
Put that in there too. Mm-hmm.
I swear, for a minute, I thought, don't tell me this woman done sprouted wings. Like
I wrote in the chat room that she was the Dark Angel.
Right.
This was the three scenes. One of the 3 scenes. So I like this scene where Drogon's wings were flapping. I was like, oh, that's tight. Then I liked when Tyrion found Jaime and Cersei, And then when I saw John hug Ghost, I was like, okay, we got our hug, and now we're done. Those were the only three things out the entire episode that I liked.
Yeah, I was like, wait a minute, she done spouted wings. She is a dragon.
But did you see her wardrobe? I mean, this is nitpicky and sort of nitpicky awesome. Did you see her wardrobe? How they had her sleeves basically look like wings. Her sleeves looked like little wings sort of moving in the breeze. It was actually kind of cool. I liked that.
No, yeah.
You know, one of the things just again, just by way of wardrobe, at the end, Sansa is wearing something completely different. And my son sat here and said, oh my God, thank God they found another place for her to shop other than Hot Topic.
Like I want to bring up Arya too. Like in the previous episode, it's like how they took a complete departure. Like Sansa, not Sansa, but Arya was very cold. She is this assassin. She has kind of dehumanized herself. She's not really caring about people. And now in this previous episode, she's like, you are going to die. Come with me. You have to get out of here. Let's go. And I was just like, just like the other previous episodes, she was like, F them people. Now it's just like, we got to get to safety. Let's go. Let's run. I'm just like, where did this come from? How do you snap so quickly?
Yeah. So crazy. Oh, that's cool. Yeah. You see this?
Bored. I was just like, I don't know these people. Yeah, I saw the wheelchair. Yeah. I was like, I was just bored by the entire thing. I was just like, I don't know you, Arya. You're telling Gendry go kick rocks. You couldn't care less. And now all of a sudden you care about these kids. I was like, whatever, man.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Cannot be bothered.
So we gotta go ahead and get on out of here. So let me start off with you, Coco. How can people get you on social media?
You can find me on Twitter. I am ONE_TRU_LUV. That is One True Love on Twitter, and that is how you can find me.
All right. And what about you, Jen? How can people get you on social media?
On Twitter, you can find me at followingbliss1. Find me at moviesmakethemeal.com and criticallaughs.com.
All right. And you can get me at Kente F. You guys have a great week.
Toodles.